So I'm back with the rayon. In the previous video, I gave you some tips on working with rayon in general. So I have my fabric. It's been pre-washed. It's been torn cross grain. I'm using the grid on my cutting table here to line my fold up and my selvages, making sure they're perfectly parallel. And I'm also making sure that my selvage and folds are perfectly perpendicular to that torn edge so that I know that my fabric is in grain. So I am using the Simple Elegant Tee pattern from, I think it's C&T Pattern Company. It's a real simple pattern to make. Just pulls over your head. It just has under the arms and side seams and a very simple binding finish. So when a pattern when pattern instructions instruct you to place something on the fold, please place it exactly on the fold. If you don't, you're adjusting something else in the pattern that you don't want to adjust. In this case, you'd be adjusting the neck. So always view garment patterns as jigsaw puzzle pieces. So I'm using a long pin that lays really flat, and I'm going to secure my pattern to the fabric along the fold line first. I always pin my place on fold lines first, or my grain lines, depending on what pattern it is that I'm working with. The beauty of this particular shirt is you've got one pattern piece, and there's also a pattern piece for a binding. I'm going to make the longer version, and I want it to be a little baggy. So one of the things I want you to think about is pattern pieces or sewing patterns don't necessarily come in the same size that you're ready to wear clothing does. So I would normally wear a 12 if I go buy something in the store. On this particular pattern, I'm going to need the size 20. Okay, so, and I'm going by my hip measurement if I want it to fit the way it needs to fit. I'm also going to lengthen my sleeve and come all the way out here. So I'm going to place some pins across the cutting line here to remind me not to cut there. Because quite frankly, once you start cutting, you kind of go into autopilot. And that doesn't work very well if you're trying to lengthen something. So my size 20 is right here, and it's going to come straight across. It'll be a little loose on me, but I like that. I'm going to actually wear these with a pair of blue jeans that I just finished making. And I did a lot of embroidery on those blue jeans. So I'm also going to just run a pin here and put one here. You can also take a ruler from the size 20 there and just do a chalk line if you want to. I'm not going to, but that would be a really good idea. You'll notice I started with my place on fold line, then I'm working my way out now. So I'm finding that size 20, and I'm pinning inside the perimeter of that size 20 cutting line. A lot of people like to trace their patterns. Let me remind you that when you trace a pattern, it does need to be for personal use. That patterns are protected by copyright for good reason. The designer puts a lot of time into drafting a pattern, and it's a very expensive process to produce one. Okay, so now that I have all that secured, and I actually would probably put more pins in rayon than I would other fabrics, because rayon is famous for having a mind of its own. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut this bottom area here, because I've got a lot of extra fabric, and I don't want it to play tug-of-war with me. just going to cut straight across. And I'm going to fold this up. Probably use it for a skirt or something. And then I'm going to cut on size 20. I want you to also notice I am not picking up my fabric to cut, okay? When people are new to sewing, I notice that they do that a lot, and it pulls your fabric all out of whack. You end up with a lot of pleats and things like that. You don't want to get into the habit of doing that. Your scissors are not going to hurt the table. I'm using dressmaker shears that are produced by Kai. I absolutely love these scissors. You kind of feel like you're cutting butter. I can cut through, oh goodness, 6 to 8 layers of denim with ease with these scissors. I just absolutely love them. Another reason I don't want to pick up my fabric when I'm cutting is it distorts it. And again, rayon, just as a review, and this is a really good piece to see that on, rayon has a mind of its own. I can literally pull it out of grain and it will still lay flat. And if your garment is not sewn in grain, it twists on you after it's made. So grain really does matter. It's an easy fabric to work with. You just want to make sure that you get it in grain first. And you do that by using a grid. The next piece I need to cut is the neckline. And I'm going to do just the scoop neck. I don't want to do the V-neck. I know this neck looks small, but once you have your seam allowance in there, it very comfortably fits over your head. Okay, so don't just start making things bigger because you think you need to enlarge something. Not only that, the seam allowance, I can't remember if the seam allowance was 5/8 on the neck. I think it's 3/8 on the neck, but that's considerably bigger once you sew the binding in the neck and turn that under, and it's a very comfortable fit over your head. So don't mess with that. Anyway, thank you for joining me while we cut the rayon. The next step is to sew it together.